These are different recitations for each other.
So who's y'all's PA? Kendall's y'all's PA and Maddie's y'all's PA. Oh, nice. Cool.
It's recording now, so just letting everyone know. So it's okay.
When I took this class, we did it online. So we each recorded our own like speech and then uploaded it, and then it was like cross.
You guys voted.
Did we vote against that option?
Yeah. Well,
because I would have chosen that option.
That wasn't an option.
Yeah, I was gonna say that wasn't it.
Yeah, I was like, I would have remembered being asked.
That's like only strictly online, never meeting someone, so it's more like approachable.
Well, it was also the semester we started in person, then had to go online.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 2020. So Dr. Lane didn't know how to like do it. So it was kind of like, how do we shift?
Sorry, I wish I could do this.
Yeah.
The papers in front of you can also be folded into like a name tag, or like. So I can write on that too.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm just grading like.
Because like
if you,
I'm worried that I don't have enough time.
if they meet the time, they don't have to use the whole like 5 minutes, right?
You don't, but it's recommended. Okay.
Yeah. But you definitely won't go anything. You won't go over 5 minutes.
No. They'll cut you off.
Yeah, I'll cut you off in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if that would impact.
But just generally know, getting closer to 5 minutes is your goal.
And you guys can fold if you want to, your name tags.
So it looks like this.
Yeah. So he can help see what your name is.
And then also, I don't really see anyone with paper, but if you have paper or if you have like several Google Docs with it, writing down what your opponents are saying adds into your 5 minutes because you want to be referring back to each other during your speeches when you can. So the first speeches, the constructives, not going to really have stuff to say in attack or anything because you're giving the constructive. But anything after that should be referring to your opponents and what they've said, and that helps take up your 5 minutes.
Yeah.
This is like the best space.
It's okay. And you know what?
Once the 5 minutes is over, so if it's 5 minutes, it's fine. We can go on and do something else with our day.
Combat like nerves and stuff.
At the end of the day, you're all on the same level. This debate doesn't determine your life, and if anything, it's just a fun experience to see what a debate looks like and have to argue someone without the fear of like possible aggression, like being created afterwards or furthermore. This is just debating a topic. You spend time researching, and to see if you can persuade someone to agree with you.
Yep.
Okay.
And you also are being graded as like first-time debaters. I'm not grading you like I would grade like an upper like 4,000 level debate.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So
This is totally like expected that you may never like you may avoid confrontation yourself. I had someone put on my team, so if you're that type of person, that's perfectly fine too.
Yeah.
Just have fun with it.
Very beginner.
Yeah.
Very beginner friendly, yes.
That's good because the bar
Okay.
doesn't have.
It's 3:30, but I guess we'll give Sharani, Shernay. We'll give them a few minutes to get here, and if not, we're going to go ahead and just move forward.
Okay.
Can she come in?
Have you written him?
She said she's on her way.
Did she say where he was at?
The language will make.
Okay. When?
Yeah, that's fine.
What is she assigned speaker-wise for your team? Third speaker. So technically for something like that, it is kind of crucial, just because she needs to be able to refer to what other speakers have done. So the only thing I can suggest is don't use your prep time, and you give her that 2 minutes for you all to talk to her and inform her what they've talked about, and then that way she can better be informed on what she's defending, and then what she needs to be brought up.
We can, like I said, we'll give her a few minutes to get here, but hopefully she'll be here shortly.
Troublemakers.
Oh.
You good to go? Anytime you're ready.
All right. 1 moment. Okay. Hello everybody, my name is Trevor. I am a TA in the comm department. Yeah, so you guys know what you're doing, you guys are ready. I asked that before you start speaking that you say your name and you say your position that you were speaking from, affirmative or the negative. Okay? Sound good? Do I need to go over anything else? Okay, you ready? Go ahead.
So my name is Joshua. I'm speaking for the affirmative. Is everybody ready? Okay. Many of us, most likely everyone in this room, is highly dependent upon the usage of fossil fuels in our lives. Yet there are many issues and calamities that have either already struck or will eventually strike if we do not ease our reliance and dependence on fossil fuels. These calamities include the recent surge of inclement weather with extreme heat and natural disasters, air and water pollution, as well as abnormal health externalities. My team and I feels that these issues must be answered immediately with the utmost urgency, and for this reason, upon the argument of regretting the dominance of the fossil fuel economy, we are taking the affirmative approach in this debate. Before I begin the contention, I would like to define certain terms and lay down the framework upon what we perceive this debate to mean. So we would like to define the term regret as it is found in the Oxford English Dictionary as a feeling of sadness, repentance, or disappointment over something that has been done. I'll be arguing 2 points. Initially, the possible negative effects of fossil fuels in terms of toxic waste and the lack of disposal of it, as well as the effects of fossil fuels on human health. Although fossil fuels do contain large amounts of energy, one thing that we must remember is that they are rarely ever found in a pure state. Typically, they must be refined and cleaned so that they can be used. The method by which excess waste is handled can be detrimental to the environmental and to environmental and human health. Fossil fuels like coal are known for being dirty fuels due to their high carbon content and their large amount of toxic metals and other heavy chemicals. When it is cleaned, the excess waste left behind holds arsenic, mercury, and other heavy metals. After coal is combusted, the excess waste is called coal ash is left behind. The combination of these two forms of waste is dumped into large impounds across the U.S., which contain millions of gallons of waste. If these reservoirs are not properly maintained, there is a risk that the chemicals can leach into surface and groundwater supplies. The presence of toxic metals in drinking water has been found to cause cancer, birth defects, neurological damage, and kidney disease. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, there are over 1,000 impoundments across the country right now, 53 of which are classified as high hazard, meaning that a failure at one of these impoundments will cause serious property damage, injuries, illness, and death. The usage of fossil fuels has caused health effects as well as the deaths of many humans across the world, the majority of which are premature. According to an editorial written by the Union of Concerned Scientists, toxic gas emissions can cause a number of health issues such as chronic bronchitis, aggravated asthma, as well as elevated occurrence of premature death. In a 2010 research article called "The Toll of Coal," it was estimated that the fine particle pollution from U.S. coal plants resulted in 13,200 deaths, 9,700 hospitalizations, and 20,000 heart attacks. In the year 2018, the number of people who died due to the pollution from fossil fuels reached upwards of 8 million, according to the Harvard School of Public Health. The impacts are particularly severe amongst the young, the elderly, and those who suffer from respiratory disease. The total health cost was estimated to be more than $100 billion per year. This fact paints a dark story that possibly not many of us are aware of. The premature loss of life is something that cannot be reversed, and we all need to have a sense of remorse because of it. No life is worth burning of coal, oil, or natural gas into the atmosphere, let alone 8 million lives. The usage of fossil fuels has caused many of us to overlook the negative outcomes that come out of it, some of which I've just listed, but the effects of fossil fuels are becoming more and more evident with each coming day. The recent surge of extreme weather, rising levels of water, and extreme heat has led to drought and wildfires in areas such as California and the desert of Australia. All of these natural disasters can be connected to the emissions of gases into the atmosphere. We must make an effort to reverse these effects and conserve our energy. According to greenamerica.org, over 34% of U.S. waste is recycled or composed. But in a recent study done by the Environmental Protection Agency, it's estimated that 75% of all waste can be recycled. Avoiding plastic bags and bottles, using public transportation, and using LED light bulbs are just a few things that can...
I plan to separate my speech into three main contentions. 1, micro, small picture, how it would affect you and I directly as the average consumer. 2, macro, big picture, how it would affect you and I without our direct knowledge. And 3, the cost-benefit analysis, why we haven't changed it still. We do not regret the dominance of the fossil fuel economy's effect on our world today. We simply cannot regret our main source of energy and power because there was no real alternative to take its place. You can't regret the actions that got us to where we're at now. Small picture, micro. If someone gave you the option between spending an extra day with your deceased grandparent or being given an extra $100 from your deceased grandparent, what would you choose, time or money? By saying you regret the fossil fuel economy, you're choosing neither. Let me explain. What is the way that we would or are seeing renewable resources pushed to the consumer for everyday use? Our transportation place to place with electric vehicles such as Tesla. So for time, by choosing an electric vehicle, you as the consumer are telling customers that your time is worthless. Daria Orizi stated that the monthly total electric vehicle charging time is 61 hours, whereas the ordinary gas vehicle takes just 30 minutes of refueling spent per month. Not only does this cost your time, but let's think about the cost to the consumer. When thinking of the price of an electric vehicle, with it is equal or greater to the upfront cost of the regular internal combustion engines, or ICE as further referred to, that we drive now. The world has been honing the craft of making energy-efficient vehicles for 2 centuries, and electric vehicles are not the way to go if you're looking for a reliable, cost-effective vehicle. Andrew Sendy stated that the upfront cost of ICE vehicles are usually lower, and you're likely to pay more for insurance for an electric vehicle than you would an ICE. Not only that, but gas stations are widely available, so you don't have to worry about running out of gas while on the road. Electric vehicles will require some extra planning to account for some slower charging stops you may encounter. And furthermore, if you thought to yourself, well, that charging time could be at home while I'm sleeping, it's simply unreasonable to think that every person would be able to afford installing their own port in their own home. Think of people living in apartments where that isn't a feasible option. Smith and Costello wrote that the cost of a single port to install a charger into your own home ranges from $300 to $40,000, with installation costing up to $3,000, on top of the price of the vehicle itself. Not to mention, there are companies right now coming out with different charging ports, much like for an iPhone, an Android would not be able to use the same lightning port meant for an Apple, and vice versa, which is nothing new for consumers. Although yes, the universal charging port could work for multiple vehicles, but that's not to say that could change, much like how Apple has different chargers for the MacBook Air to the MacBook Pro. Alongside the thought of cost, you would be paying more to replace any part of an electric vehicle. The Kelley Blue Book company stated that, depending on power, size, and quality, prices for a replacement car battery range from about $45 to $250, and they last approximately 3 to 5 years. Google snippets proclaim that the Tesla Model 3 battery replacement costs between $3,000 and $7,000, and Charlotte Van Barlingen state that an electric vehicle battery will last between 10 to 20 years. If you do the math, you'd be paying way more each time to replace the main component of your electric vehicle over time. Is that exchange rate worth it to you? Now let's think about macro, the big picture. What's happening around us in order to propose electric vehicles as a proponent as your debate against the fossil fuel economy. You must know where the money comes from to complete such a radical shift. To think about change, one could think about the implementation of charging ports and the lack of need for gas stations we have today. Scott Horsley from NPR stated that on a practical level, the U.S. is really behind in infrastructure investment on both state and local government spending on infrastructure is about 1.5 trillion short of the path it was on before the last big recession. With America already being trillions of dollars in debt, especially with the relief fund in mind, putting our nation further in debt, who would be funding the complete and total change fallout? Now let's talk about tax cuts. Our country uses those taxes to construct infrastructure, and we would have disparities in our taxation that would force us to need to pull funds elsewhere if we were to eliminate or even lessen the use of fossil fuels. Halbrook and Donald stated that in 2018, Texas motor fuels, let's get that. When we think of the environment, switching to electric vehicles and clean energy wouldn't magically clean the air from fossil fuel emissions overnight, and there would be radical effects on the Earth's atmosphere. Alexandria Pugh and Owen Mulhern stated that the CO2 left unabsorbed by the sinks would linger in the atmosphere for around 300 to 1,000 years, which means our icebergs are already melting. In our cost-benefit analysis, as in why we haven't changed it yet, we cannot say that we regret the dominance of fossil fuels because there is no real alternative that would produce mass change. I must restate,
Time.
I didn't get to any of that one.
Okay, so. So yeah, you do your first question period between both first speakers, and it's 2 minutes long.
You spoke of the disposal of fossil fuels, but neglected the disposal of lithium-ion batteries, which are what store our energy banks from solar and wind energy turbines. And lithium-ion batteries are the batteries that are used in electric vehicles. They're not allowed to use the same recycling methods as everything else, and only 5% of those that were recycled correctly of those batteries were recycled correctly. So potentially the renewable resources would create, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, would create potentially more toxic waste than fossil fuel waste.
Okay, to that I say, I really meant for that point, I wanted to focus on maybe what already has happened due to the use of coal. You see the effects of it right now. There's many plots all over the country that cause toxic waste to be flooding into water systems, energy systems in certain communities. So you brought up that you spoke about the melting of ice already being an occurrence. And you said that came from what exactly? It was just already...
Yeah, there was no denial that that's from CO2 emissions.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying that even if we stopped CO2 emissions right now, our icebergs already melted, because to reach in order to reach radiative equilibrium, after stopping carbon emissions, it would call for about 5 degrees Celsius or 32.9 degrees Fahrenheit of further warming from that same source, Alexandria.
Yes.
Make sure that the judge or the one critiquing you is ready with your paper and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Just give me a
No,
second.
you're good.
Okay, so the second speaker, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So everybody's ready? All right. I'm Brooke. I'm the second affirmative speaker. Let me see. So I guess to start, I'm going to touch on that it is true that switching from fossil fuels to clean energy is going to take time and money, like they were talking about. But I feel like there's a third option that was left out, life and the future. Forget about time, because in the big picture, a few hours of charging your car or whatever really means nothing in the big scheme of things. I'd be willing to spare a few extra hours of my time if it meant I could create a better or existing planet for future generations. You can bring your own charger the same way you should be bringing jumper cables with you in your regular gas guzzling car. So that really doesn't seem like an issue to me. But with the topic at hand, we regret the dominance of fossil fuels in the economy because of lasting consequences that come with the heavy use of fossil fuels. We see these effects all the time, from global warming with crazy storms, fires, heat waves, to long-lasting health problems, as Josh was touching on, and even death, as air pollution due to fossil fuels resulted in 8.7 million deaths globally in 2018. Today, humans are emitting greenhouse gases at a much higher rate than any previous increase in history. If this doesn't convey the issue well enough, here is what will happen if we don't slow down or stop this. The impacts of climate change are far-reaching. No one is spared. They include even more frequent and intense weather phenomenon, including floods, greater sea level rise, threatened ecosystems, food insecurity, and health effects, as we discussed previously. Denouncing our old ways and moving on to better, cleaner, safer solutions can also help boost our economy. Current clean energy jobs offer high pay and benefits. They're labor intensive, so they generally create more jobs per dollar invested than traditional electricity generation technologies. Some more food for thought on that is Americans spend about $1,900 per year per person on energy purchases, which is about 8% of the average person's total expenditures on goods and services in a given year. Of this amount, approximately 40% goes to pay for electricity. Energy purchases represent a significant cost to society, both nationally and locally, and it's important to spend energy dollars in a way that strengthens the economy rather than depleting it. In many cases, energy dollars are going to regional utilities or suppliers of oil or natural gas. Once those dollars have been spent on importing energy into the community or state, they're not available to foster additional economic activity. Every dollar spent on imports is a dollar lost from the local community, and these energy imports represent a substantial loss to local companies in terms of income and jobs. Renewable energies is primarily indigenous resources, so most of the energy dollars can be kept here at home. I guess fossil fuels also have like a death date. There's a predicted timeline from Stanford EDU that says oil will end by 2052, that's 30 years. Gas in 2060. Coal will last until about 2090, which is only 70 years. And according to BP, the Earth has 53 years of oil reserves left at the current rate of consumption. This means we need to have a plan, which is where clean energy comes into play. So even if you don't regret the use of fossil fuels, there will be nothing to regret in 70 years' time. We're going to run out, and if we don't make changes now, then we're not going to have time to do that later. Can I ask how much time I have?
42 seconds.
I have nothing else to say.
23 seconds maybe.
I'm ready.
Okay. regret the dominance of the fossil fuel economy's effects on our world today. The term regret is a loaded word in its assertion towards the fossil fuel industry as a whole. We can all agree that without the advancements created with the help of fossil fuels, humanity today wouldn't be as well off. Fossil fuels are engraved into our society and have been for centuries. We've made leaps and bounds within society simply because of the various ways we are able to incorporate fossil fuels. The transition to a renewable energy economy won't happen in our lifetime, and maybe not within the next. According to Inspire Clean Energy, the transition to renewable energy may take 4 or even 5 decades to get to a place where it's making a recognizable impact. Even with the potential scarcity of fossil fuels, renewable energy wouldn't be well integrated into our infrastructure without changing its entirety. Over 3/4 of global energy demand is still met by fossil fuels, with less than 1/5 by non-nuclear renewables. According to Energy Watchdog, this is according to Energy Watchdog, the International Energy Agency. In order to delegate this comparison of benefit versus cost efficiency, it's important to review the life cycle of energy. So the CEO of Canary LLC, Dan Hebhart, states, life cycle analysis of energy technologies give a better idea of carbon dioxide emissions, including indirect emissions caused by the production of materials, manufacturing of equipment, and construction of plants. It shows in particular that the renewable sources are non-carbon free. Furthermore, he states that several life cycle analysis published in recent years confirm that wind, solar, hydropower regularly require more raw materials, including iron, copper, aluminum, and cement per unit of energy produced than coal and gas-fired electric generation. As an increased amount of raw materials begs for an increased budget. Even more so, an increase in raw materials could render an increase in imports. These renewable resources require a massive contribution with very little output and tons of upkeep. Australian researcher Edgar Herbich found that solar photovoltaics, PV, can require 10 to 40 times more copper per megawatt hour than fossil fuel-fired plants. Onshore wind generation can need up to 15 times more iron. Furthermore, many vital instruments are petroleum-based and wouldn't be capable of functioning on renewable-based resources or even duplicated because they were built with non-renewable resources in mind. The fact of the matter is, fossil fuels are still heavily maintaining our daily lives, merely because it's proven to sustain this essence of stability throughout for millions. The absence of fossil fuels would dramatically disturb our economy, create economic depression for our economy and others, and furthermore leave millions in dire need of a solution.
You have a minute 30 left. Okay.
Okay.
So y'all have a 2-minute crossfire.
2-minute crossfire. Can ask each other like questions. I'm sorry. So whenever you guys are ready, I'm ready.
Did you want to go first?
The affirmative, you guys will.
Oh, okay. Cool. So if you're worried about the amount of resources needed to create sources of clean energy, why are you not worried about the amount of fossil fuels needed to maintain our daily lives?
It's not that we're not worried about it, it's the fact that renewable resources do require more. I mean, it's proven, like, even wind turbines use fossil fuels or some form of fossil fuel to create it or even run it. I mean, my question for you would be, you state that if their charging port means nothing, would that mean to do away with electric cars, or with renewable resources, would that help those cars?
I'm sorry, I did not understand your question.
Okay. You said if charging means nothing, would that mean to do away with renewable resources that basically make those, like, renewable energy products?
I think if I'm understanding you correctly, when I said that charging means nothing, I meant in terms of time. I'd be willing to spend a few hours charging my car if that meant that I could have an impact on our future.
What would that little time do for the future, though?
I mean, not using gas. If everyone took time out of their day to just charge their car rather than resorting to easier but less safe and more damaging options, then it could create an impact.
Well, what makes you think everyone can afford that avenue of living?
At this point, I do not think everyone could afford that, but also people are struggling to afford gas with the way things are going right now, and prices will only get higher. So if you're willing to invest in something that would help long term, then.
So you guys talk a lot about how fossil fuels are affecting, I guess, the general health of people. I don't know where I'm going with that. How?
Well, we stated a lot of facts about that. I mean, air pollution alone. Okay.
And then, what's your name? Did you get it?
Oh,
I did.
Amaya.
Maya, thank you, Maya. All right, ready when you are.
My name is Shanae and I'm with Friends. I would like to reiterate the regret of the use of fossil fuels. With the way we are living as a society, are we willing to put human life at risk for the sake of easier travel or easier access to things because it's what we're used to? I would also like to go into the fact of reiterating what Brooke said about the health of our society involving coal, gas, and oil as well. From the ndr.org, it says at the moment, it goes into play of carbon dioxide burning when coal-fired power plants generate 42% of dangerous mercury emissions into the United States. That is 2/3 of the U.S. sulfur dioxide. I would also like to get into the coal, oil, and gas development. It is a threat to our waterways. It has a chance of slipping. We have acid runoff into our streams, rivers, lakes,